welcome to a new episode of the Fortress of Filitude. In today's episode, I'm going to retread a little bit of ground. 2 episodes ago, I think it was episode 4, I made some display bases for the rotating display stand. And I mentioned in that video that you could actually make those out of XPS foam. I made those out of foam core. But the idea being that with the XPS foam, you could texture both sides. So knowing I was going to do that, I figured I would go ahead and make a video just showing that. And as you can see, that's what I did. A more traditional dungeon stone and a more traditional sci-fi version. Now they don't start off quite this way. You'll see in the video about halfway through what I start with changes, and there's a good reason why. But let's go ahead and check out the rest of the video and see how I made this. So I started with a simple square of XPS foam. I could cut this out with a Olfa knife or some other kind of real sharp utility knife, or you could cut it out with a hot wire foam cutter, probably the easiest way. Or if you wanted to get really creative, you could even try something like a lightsaber, although I don't know, that might leave the edges a little burnt and crispy. So luckily I decided to just go with the hot wire foam cutter. I kept the temperature on, I think, a 1.5, just to give myself a little bit more control since I was kind of freehanding this cut. This is 1/2-inch XPS foam. You can kind of tell from the angle there that some of the edges came out a little rough, but overall I was happy with the result. I just needed a basic circle. One side came out a little clearer than the other. By clearer, I mean the edge looks a little better. The other side is a little rougher. I guess the wire beveled a little bit as I was pushing it through. So the better looking side, I was going to make the sci-fi texture, and the bumpier edged side, the dungeon stone. So just basically made some marks, kind of eyeballed it. I wasn't worried about being super precise. And this video is sped up at this point. I didn't really go that fast, or I would have definitely made a mess of it. But I just made some basic grid lines. I like this pencil I've got. It's just an old art pencil. It's got a soft tip. It's rounded. It's really good for pressing these textures into the foam. So yeah, I just went across here with the straight edge and marked out my basic grid. Doing it one way, turned it around and did the other direction, just making the standard dungeon square grid, 1-inch squares. Nothing super fancy here. Now you may think, well, you know, hey man, you took a real risk eyeballing it, but it wasn't difficult. It turned out good. Put some cracks in there, and then went through with the smaller utility knife and kind of cut out some edges, put some sort of damage onto the stones to make them just look like they were even older, more weathered. Once that was done, I had to do the sci-fi side, and I wasn't real sure how I was going to do it. I wanted to do something, not just a basic floor grid, but I wanted to put some kind of extra embellishment in the center, some kind of a grid, like a grating, tread pattern. I wasn't real sure what I was going to do yet. I kind of searched around the house for a while trying to find something I could use to sort of press a texture into the foam that would kind of get the effect that I wanted. And try as I might, I couldn't find anything right away, and I don't know, I was having a brain fart. I couldn't really figure out what to use to put in there. I did come up with a solution later on, but initially, after just drawing in the basic deck plates, I decided to use a template and just put some smaller rectangles through the center, and then put some lines in those just to kind of make it look sort of like some kind of a utility grating or vent. Didn't turn out super great, but you know, it scratched my itch at the time. I thought that would be good enough, especially since this is just going to be a display base, not something I'm going to use all the time. not something that I'm mounting miniatures on permanently that, that I'd be too worried about it looking super perfect. You can tell kind of free-handed there, that's a little off-center. Then I went with the Mod Podge and black paint. And while you watch me do this, you may say, it kind of looks a little watery, right? Looks like a little too runny. Well, it was. The Dungeon Stone, I just did a basic overbrush of a light gray color, just enough to kind of highlight it. Then did a black wash just to bring some of the lines back out, to highlight those cracks a little bit. It goes on pretty thick, but I did sponge some of it off with a paper towel just to keep it from pooling up. And then I went and dry brushed with an even lighter gray when it's almost white. Just kind of helped highlight some of the texture. Simple technique, I'm sure all of you are familiar with it. Basic dry brushing. And then I went and stippled some brown just to give it some variety. I used a light tan. I think it's like a honey brown, I think is the actual name of the color, but any light brown would work. And then I tried a green. I thought I'd make this look really dank. You've got some moss or algae, mildew growing. Once I sealed this in a clear gloss, it really made it look kind of wet and damp, so it was a nice effect. I kind of like the way it turned out. For the sci-fi version, I used a gunmetal color. So here's a fun one. So I got the dungeon side sealed. Looks pretty nice, pretty happy. So then I went out to seal the sci-fi side. Oops. Yeah, not sealed as well as I thought it was. So yeah, the matte spray melted the foam. Should have put a thicker coat of Mod Podge on there. Even with that coat and the paint, it just wasn't enough to protect it. And the chemicals from the aerosol cans still got through. So now I get to fix this by shaving off this top layer and redoing it. That's okay, it can be fixed. And worst comes to worst, I still have one side I can use, right? Alright, let's keep going. So here you can see version 2. And I figured out what to use for the grid down the middle. I don't know why I hadn't thought of it earlier, but self-adhesive drywall tape. Perfect texture, it's very thin. I could have used granny grading, but then I would have had to have dug out sections of the foam, which I didn't want to do. There it is, with a thicker coat of black Mod Podge this time. And I decided to go with a silver color instead of gunmetal. Took a couple of coats, but I thought it looked better once it was done. So I got the main deck plates covered with the silver. And then once I had those done, I dry brushed some silver over that center section where the drywall tape is. It's a nice grid. And, going back to my original idea of just shaving off that side with the hot wire, yeah, that didn't work so well. So I basically had to start over with a whole new circle. You can see I had to do a whole nother dungeon texture on the other side. Once again, just dry brushed some gray on there. Kind of a heavy dry brush, which some people might call an overbrush. I kept the other base. I'll use the dungeon texture on the first base from time to time. And did the same thing. I stippled on some brown, did the black wash. Didn't put the green on this time. I kind of liked the way it looked without the green. And there's the finished result. With the intrepid player characters from a Pathfinder campaign, which we haven't been able to play for quite a while, thanks to the stupid pandemic, which continues to rage on. Hopefully these guys will get back into action soon. I know we all miss playing, and you can see them in all their glory when the lighting's not the best. And then the sci-fi version, I like the way it turned out. I think it looks better than what I originally started with. And there you have it. So if you wouldn't mind, please like, Subscribe, share, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers, and we'll see you next time on the Fortress of Philitude.